Thanks for watching The Thought Criminals, named after the Orwellian criminalization of independent thought and free speech. I'm your host, Rachel Alexander. I'm a weekly contributor to Townhall and other sites and the editor of Intellectual Conservative. And this is my mall, Ralph Benko, who worked in or with the Reagan, W. Bush, and Trump White Houses. He's a weekly columnist for Newsmax, co-author of The Capitalist Manifesto, and co-founder and executive chairman of the 184,000 Capitalist League Facebook group. And today we are going to talk to you about how bad wokeness has become. Ralph was decided to write about this due to some things that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis just said. And we're also going to discuss an incident where a professor used a word that sounded too much like the N-word, even though it had nothing to do with it, and they tried to cancel him. And there's a book that addresses it, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But since this was Ralph's idea for this column, I'm going to let Ralph start out.
Well, just okay. You've done this backward, Rachel. Congratulations, but that's okay. I will try to walk the cat backwards and not get totally lost. Rick DeSantis is the governor of Florida, and he just
Ron
DeSantis. Ron
DeSantis, not Rick DeSantis.
Oh my gosh, I better change my column because I got his first name wrong. You know, I'm in Maryland, so what do I know? Ron DeSantis.
And by the way, if you don't fix it, that's all you'll be known for the rest of your life. I mean, the New York Times, they make mistakes every single day. They have massive editors, massive reporters, and every day you can see at the bottom, you know, there's a correction from yesterday, but it doesn't matter. If you little old Ralph makes one little tiny mistake, you're not perfect, you're not God, it will be brought up forever and ever and stop you from getting jobs and positions. And anyway, go on.
Okay, well, Governor DeSantis, Governor R. DeSantis was the speaker before a group I hadn't heard of before, the Common Sense Society based in Florida, which is chaired and I suspect supported by a gentleman who is a Hungarian refugee who lived under communism in Hungary before and during and after when the Soviet tanks rolled in. It was absolute misery. He's a very well-spoken, very articulate man. And he was the one who introduced Governor DeSantis as a future president of the United States. But he basically said, we were not, in Hungary under communism, we were not allowed to say certain things or we would be persecuted and crushed if it violated the dogma that the Communist Party was the representative of the people. And so I said, wow, that's wokeism before wokeism. To be forbidden from saying, I'm sorry?
Pre-wokeism.
Well, it's wokeism. So the point that I made in my column about DeSantis was that, hey, this is, wokeism is just another form of thought control as was being practiced under communism. And what really inspired me, there were three things that inspired me about DeSantis's speech. The first thing was he packed it all into 16 minutes. Maybe I've been tainted by the fact that I'm an acolyte of Jack Kemp, who couldn't say hello in less than an hour. Okay, Jack was like notoriously long-winded. But the fact that DeSantis could make his points in 16 minutes was very impressive. The first half of the speech was all about all of the battles he's fought for freedom, battles he's fought for prosperity, battles he's fought for the conservative principles in Florida, making Florida not only the most conservative state in the country, but one of the most conservative places, one of the freest places in the world. And he made the point, he had to fight for that. And every time he moved forward with something that was that represented a principled stand for liberty, the left and the wokists would go nuts, and he would just never back down. And I'm really impressed the fact that he is not intimidated by their efforts to not only is he not intimidated by their efforts to cancel him, but he relishes the fight and has won every single battle. And he also pointed out that he did certain election law reforms that were far more stringent than those in Georgia. And instead of big business and corporation quailing and basically siding with the woke contingent, he said, hey, they knew that I would come after them if they did that to me. And so they didn't dare. And so they just stayed on the sidelines. And I thought that was great because, me, one of my signature issues, Rachel, is I hate snowflakery, and I particularly hate snowflakery from the right. And so if the right is whining, then I got no use for them. If somebody is doing something we don't approve of, time for us to stand up, show some backbone, fight. And guess what? As DeSantis has proven by his actions, if we fight, we will win because we are stronger and more in the right than they are. So I always cringe when I hear our own version of the politically correct going all victim playing the victim card that those mean lefties are picking on us. Yeah, okay, good. Then let's double down on picking on them. So I love that.
I agree with you on we should lose Alinsky tactics on them as long as we don't get into like lying and cheating and things like that. But what I particularly like about DeSantis is I think he's actually highly effective because he realizes one of the left's tactics that's been so successful is to destroy us by the careless things we say. And unlike so many on the right today, and I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure you will, Ralph, he actually watches what he says. Gee, what a concept, he sticks by the William F. Buckley Jr. rule, one of his rules, which is, treat your opponent with respect and don't be comparing everything your opponent does to what the Nazis did.
Right.
And if our side could just, govern by those rules, guess what? A lot of us we'd still be in office like Ron DeSantis. We wouldn't be completely destroyed. And it's just so frustrating that whatever happened to, good manners.
Yeah, I remember back after Obama was elected and everybody was in a shell shocked. And I remember going to things like the Grover meeting and saying, and everybody else would have been whining about how horrible Obama was, and was going to be. And I would stand up and I would say, I love Barack Obama. And a hush fell over the room. You could hear a pin drop. And then I paused for dramatic effect. And I said, not since Christmas Day, 1991, when the Soviet Union dissolved, have I had an adversary worthy of my powers. So I am so thrilled to finally, with Barack Obama, have an adversary worthy of my powers. So, Mr. President, bring it on.
And another point I wanted to bring up with, because you and me are in lockstep that we've got to stop just being on the defensive and whining. That's how they're beating us. And so one action I took, I got sick and tired of it was honestly my left-wing friend who always prompts me into action because he's so bright and he knows how to play the game better than anybody. And so he just keeps saying, you guys are the party of old white men and all the youth are deserting you. And he said that over and over again to me for years until I finally did the research. And it's not like I can be a lefty journalist and just go out there and easily Google it and, find the real numbers. So it took me hours, but after hours of scouring the web using alternative search engines, since Google censors all this stuff out, I discovered that it's not.
That is fake news. But anyway, what did you discover using Bing or whatever?
News? Do I need to update and do another article on doing research on Google versus DuckDuckGo or something else? I mean, it is diametrically opposite results, and it adds so much more time onto my articles, having to research articles. 15 years ago when I researched articles, never ran into this problem. Now, I'm even banned from Google News. You can't find my name in Google News. I used to be all over Google News with my columns. I mean, it's gotten to a point where it's exhausting, and I don't have all the solutions, but
it was that column that you wrote talking about how really Copernicus was wrong and Ptolemy was right, and the sun goes around the earth, that probably made the censors over at Google say, that's the last straw.
No, that's the article that you wrote, and they accidentally put my name on it. And by the way, while we're going off, I just want to point out, did you see that AOC, just your hero, just slammed capitalism the other day?
My heroine, not my hero. Let's be gender correct. Let's be gender correct about this.
Oh wait, she's not going to like that. She's going to want to be they or something. So you're already.
I don't think so. She's a babe. She is a total babe.
Oh, she's going to go off on being called
she's
that.
No Rachel Alexander, but she's right up there. And anyway, the reason this got such coverage was because she was taking a dig at Biden, because Biden was crusading on how he styles himself a capitalist. And when she came out right afterwards against capitalism, this was her way of needling your president. And so,
Ralph, have you in our videos not figured out yet that when I want to distract you and put you on the defensive, all I do is bring up AOC. I learned that trick with my late older brother years ago. Whenever I would want to distract him and get him off of some topic I didn't want to talk about, all I did was I brought up this one long-term girlfriend he had, and I would say, well, remember when you went out with that feminist for several years? He would take the bait every time.
I will take the bait. Anytime you dangle AOC in front of me, I will take that bait. She's just, I disagree with everything she says, including and the, but I find her compellingly charming, and I'm glad she's in the world, and I'm glad she's in the House. Well, that said, DeSantis, the second reason that I really that DeSantis won me, I've been ambivalent about him before, was because he correctly identified wokeism as cultural Marxism, which is exactly what it is. And I give him full props for brains, heart, and courage for being willing to put a name to it. Okay, wokeism sounds much more benign. It doesn't sound benign we all know that it's heinous, but it's a euphemism for Marxism, specifically cultural Marxism. And the fact that and by the way, he's a very private guy, but I know people who know him up close and personal, who at least have worked with him, and they say he's seriously bright. He reads the original research papers. He just doesn't read the news. So when he's formulating Florida's COVID response policy, he has dug down into the actual scientific research himself, rather than relying just on what he reads in the newspapers, or even relying on what his advisors have to say. He's done his own research. I give him a lot of credit for that. It shows that he is intellectually curious the way Jack Kemp was, and Jack Kemp's willingness to think for himself, to be, in our lingo, a thought criminal, rather than somebody who's just parroting the dogma of the experts in the state, also endeared DeSantis to me very much. So the fact that he was willing to, the fact that he turns out to be really smart and tough, and the fact that he turns out to understand things like cultural Marxism, and the fact that he's willing to fight for our liberty, all endeared me to him very much. And the speech was really one of the best political speeches I've heard in years.
Well, to get as far as he has gotten and to be that conservative and to get that many things aggressively done, there is no doubt in my mind that he must be brilliant, because there's just everybody else who who gets that far. I mean, most of them get destroyed or halfway destroyed. I mean, they make a mistake. I mean, the problem with most conservatives, as I said earlier, is they're unable to talk politely, and they just want to say all these radical things. And it's the saying, loose lips sink ships. It's like they don't recall that. It's one thing if you're at home with your spouse and nobody is listening to you talk, but if you're out and about doing something, like let's say you're giving a speech and you don't think anybody's there, but people are recording you, and these politicians don't just seem to understand that. But let's go ahead and pivot to this great article you found in the Daily Mail about how there was this professor at I believe UCLA who just giving a lecture on business communications, and since a lot of his students are, and to correct myself, that's the University of Southern California.
Right.
A lot of his students are Chinese. He was giving an example from a Mandarin word. He was telling people how when you talk to other people, don't keep saying and and so he gave an example in Mandarin that is a word that sounds like nay, ga. And so people got really offended and decided that he was saying the N word. And so they went after him, they suspended him, when everybody knows he wasn't being racist. This was out of control. And so the article...
Ironically, they were being racist by culturally appropriating a perfectly innocent Chinese phrase and repurposing it to pretend that it meant or had a connotation that it didn't. So it was a sort of anti-Chinese racism, ironically enough. There was not a hint of anti-Black racism in his use of this. This was not provocative. This was not some kind of dog whistle.
Well,
and he eventually got exonerated, but he had to be put through the ringer first because he was being persecuted and bullied by these, so-called woke student activists.
Well, and I don't think you and I would go so far as to say this, but there is a perception out there that there is racism from some Black people towards some Asian people. So if you and I were woke and left, we would say, oh yeah, this is a racist reaction by these, Black students against him because of there you go, the racism from, alleged Blacks towards alleged Asians. Anyway, that's going off on a tangent, but this is absolutely out of control when everybody knows it wasn't racism, but it's being treated as if it was racism. It's this hypersensitivity that it's out of control, and everybody's become targets. If you're anything like a public figure, and this guy isn't even much of a public figure, he's a professor. I mean, he's just got students.
Yes, but now you've built your diving board, Rachel, brilliantly. Now bounce up and down and dive into the pool, because a Black professor has written a book called Woke Racism, in which he is specifically calling this out as, I think the phrase that was used in the Daily Mail column, a form of mental illness. If you can't basically deal with other people with respect, even when you disagree, if everything becomes a trigger to try to cancel them. He basically said that in and of itself is a form of racism. That in and of itself is a disorder. And so, look, the thing that I loved about this story, and I love about this book, I can't wait to read it, is that the most effective approaches to confronting and pushing back racism, not racism, wokeism, are actually coming from the left, not from the right. And we should be paying close attention both to their tactics and to the fact that we have strange bedfellow allies out there. The French intellectuals have been having, and the French academics and the French politicians, including the education minister, have been doing the polite form of social rioting against wokeism, which they're calling an American infection on French culture. Okay, the idea that someone can be attacked for saying there are two organic genders. The First Lady of France said there are just men and women. The pronouns we have, or not the pronouns, the particles that we have. Somebody was attacking, saying, well, we can't use le and la anymore because one is masculine, one is feminine. She said, we've got a beautiful language. It reflects that, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it. So coming from, most Americans think the French intellectuals are some kind of pernicious, elitist, effetist, kind of snob, left-wing nuts. But they're the ones who are leading the charge in Europe against wokeism. You've got this great Black professor who wrote the book Woke Racism, who is also calling this out. We have a lot of friends, if you will, or a lot of people who share our opinion, who we typically dismiss as lefties, okay? And that's just wrong, because there isn't one left, there are two lefts. And believe it or not, there's a conservative left and there's a progressive left. The progressives are the totalitarians. The progressives are the one who are pushing woke stuff. The progressives are the one who are pushing newspeak and mind control and thought policing, okay? But the labor left, the union members, like me, I'm an AFL-CIO, card-carrying, dues-paying members, and the ethnic left, which would be Blacks and Latinos and Asians, okay? They hate that stuff. And they are liberal in the old classical sense of the word. First of all, what they really want is they want the government to make sure that they're getting an even break when it comes to getting really good jobs. Okay, they're not looking for socialism, they're looking for opportunity. Secondly, all of this cultural Marxism stuff is as offensive to them as it is to us, whether it's the Teamsters, whether it's the French intellectuals. And I've written about this at Newsmax, and I'll be writing about this again. And it fits right into DeSantis's ethos, which is to say, this is bad stuff. Cultural Marxism, wokeism is bad stuff, and we need to fight it. And I'm just adding to that, adding to his point, not in my column because that's another column, is we have allies in the labor and the ethnic left who we should be making common cause with to fight against the nomenclatura, the progressives who are really just communists in drag.
I wanted to add on to that good point about how we have allies on the left. I don't know if you pay much attention to entertainment, gossipy types of news. I generally don't, but once in a while, like reading this Daily Mail article, I'll go click on one of their clickbait, showbiz articles on the right. And if you scroll through them, it's just astonishing how much the left is going after their buddies on the left for all kinds of things. So for example, all these, actresses and social media.
Let's get personal. Whoopi Goldberg, okay, she said something that was vaguely, maybe a little possibly interpretable as insensitive to the more volatile Jewish sensibilities, okay, and she got suspended from The View for 2 weeks.
And nobody thinks she's an anti-Semite. I don't know.
Nobody thinks she's anti-Semite. This just goes, shows how far the lunatic fringe has taken control. And by the way, I believe it's taken control in both parties. But I'll talk about the impact of the lunatic fringe on the right some other time. I just think that the rank and file members of the left, the union members, the workers, the proletariat like me, and the ethnic left should rise up and kick butt, take names, and take these progressives out of their positions of power, authority, and voice, and they should replace them with themselves. They should replace them with normal, sane, kitchen table left wingers like my parents were, who really all they care about is that the working people get the opportunity to earn their way into the middle class. The progressives are part of the communist class warfare story. Okay, they want class warfare. They want to destroy the bourgeoisie, who they consider to be the enemy of the people. Okay, my lefties, the ethnic left and the labor left, they want to become the bourgeoisie. They want to become the middle class. They don't want to destroy it. Okay, they are really in total. They are allies in waiting for us, and I really am passionate about how we should open the door and make friends and party with these people. There are peeps, and united we stand, divided we fall.
And I just wanted to bring up two more names that the left has tried to cancel on the left, just because these were two of the biggest names you heard being canceled over the last year, and both of them are not conservative. And most of us, I mean, or a lot of us on the right, don't even like them because they are so not conservative. And I'm just going to throw them out there. It's Dave Chappelle and Joe Rogan. And for those of you who don't know much about either of them, Dave Chappelle has the filthiest mouth and he goes after conservatives all the time. And Joe Rogan has a horrible history when it comes to pornography. And he's basically a left libertarian. So, I mean, and I'll just go off on a little bit of a tangent here. What I don't like is when the left goes after one of these people and we feel obliged to defend them because we're the pro-free speech party. And what they do, and what they did with Joe Rogan is, it was very clever. After they started going after him, they dredged up his use in previous series of the N-word, which was ridiculous because, okay, first of all, he's a comedian. Second of all, as my Black boyfriend likes to point out defending him, he grew up in a very rough neighborhood. So whatever, he can defend him. I'm not going to defend him. But my point being is they deliberately timed that. The left timed that. So they go after Joe Rogan first because of COVID, right? They disagree with him there. And then after they've got that controversy going, then they bring up his previous use of the N-word. So now, you know, anyone who defends him gets stuck. Now you've got to defend his use of the N-word. So this is how clever the left has become. They think way ahead of us. They think in chess moves. And if they've got us going from defending our own to defending people we don't like at all and don't even watch.
Okay, I've actually never heard an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. Of course, I know who he is. I've known who he is for a long time. He's got the #1 podcast in the country, but so far as I can tell, he's just not. I like the fact that he has these wide-ranging discussions about ideas, and I don't hold it against him that I don't agree with all of his ideas. And so, to the extent that it's a sort of, it's a breath of fresh air to know that there's somewhere you can go and just talk about stuff. Is like, I like that a lot. And not enough to actually tune him in, but 40 million people do, and so he's really got quite a following.
He's like the new Larry King.
I don't know. I was not a big fan of Larry King either, but it's okay. Rachel, you know me. I'm so full of opinions. There's no room in here for other people's opinions. So I'd rather be expressing my opinions in one of my columns or our podcast or our new platform, which is thethoughtcriminals.ning.com, where I am curating articles that I see about how people around the world are effectively fighting back against totalitarianism, against the criminalizing of thinking, against free speech. And I don't mean indecent speech. I don't mean hate speech. I just mean being willing to undertake controversial opinions that are not undertaken out of animus or out of an invidiousness against minorities. So the only good thing I have to say about what's going on here is these people out there are destroying themselves. The progressives are destroying themselves. They're eating their own. And eventually, like the worm Ouroboros, they'll swallow their own tail and then disappear, and then the world will be a much better place. So as the old political saying goes, when your political adversary is committing suicide, stay out of his way.
You know, I used to think that things were just going to get worse and worse and worse. You know, as a Bible believing Christian, you know, we believe the end of the world is coming. And if you read the book of Revelation, the US doesn't appear to be around. But I've gotten a lot of hope in the last few years, not only from seeing how a lot of the young people are becoming so conservative, but also from seeing how insane the loony left has become. You know, back in, 1980, okay, granted, that's a long time ago. I was not, yeah. Anyway,
You were in diapers in 1980,
yeah,
I believe.
let's
Probably,
not get into
probably,
that. But
probably cloth diapers, which is probably why you grew up to be a
when I was
conservative.
in political science,
Disposable diapers.
when I was a political science major in college, I studied the 1980s. And the one thing that I recall back then is the left was a formidable enemy back then. And, you could kind of see their point of view on things. And maybe this is part of the reason why you moved to the right yourself, Ralph, over the years, is the left has really progressively been moving more to the left since the JFK era. And so many of the views they take are so crazy. I really believe that is why we've seen this walkaway movement. We've seen this huge increase in minorities move to the Republican Party because their positions have become so undefensible. Their positions have become so ridiculous. I think it's as much as they try to censor us online, if you can just get around a little bit of that censorship, or you have some parents who open up with discussions around the coffee table, I mean, it's going to be the natural, more logical position to default to the right.
Yeah, I just think it's better than that, Rachel. As Joe Manchin, future President Manchin, or maybe future Vice President Manchin, Rogan Manchin 2024. Okay, has said America is a center-right country. This is unequivocally true. But the thing is, the progressives have the microphones. Okay, the lunatics are running the asylum. Okay, they have the positions of visibility. They have the positions of money. They have the positions of deep state administrative state control. By the way, I've been in there. I've worked in there. It's not so deep. It's about 1 millimeter deep. So let's not flatter them by calling it the deep state. Okay, it's the shallow state. And if you call them the deep state, it romanticizes them and gives them more power by making us think they've got more power than they've got. So the fact is that this is a center-right country. The Democratic Party, for heaven's sakes, nominated the most centrist candidate they had in 2020, Joe Biden. They had Bernie Sanders. They had Elizabeth Warren. They had all of these, hard lefties, and they went nowhere. Okay, the people covet sort of center right, center left candidates. Okay, we're not extremists, and if you look at the polling,
I would argue a little bit there because we did elect Trump, and Trump did not run as a moderate. But by the end of that primary, he was way to the right.
He ran as a maniac with a weird eclectic mixture of far right and far left and far out positions. That is absolutely true, Rachel. And
we'll have to discuss this on a future episode. And I still need to write about conservatism versus populism, because that is a whole topic unto itself.
That's a good topic. With Victor Davis Hanson just wrote a book called The Two Populisms, a short book. Shoot me a text and I'll send it to you. I downloaded it. But look, please read my last column, my previous column at Newsmax, in which I basically said,
which one's that one?
That's the one about how Trump understood that the important thing was getting attention, not what people said about him, that people said things about him. So Trump was a genius. This was at Newsmax, so you could look it up. Trump was a genius at attention getting by saying the most outlandish things. Some of them were far right, some of them were far left, and some of them were just far out. And the common denominator for Trump,
I think the things he said that were far left were pretty minimal, but
tariffs, anti-immigration.
No, tariffs, I will argue with you on that one because there is an argument, a conservative argument for tariffs.
No, there isn't. That's a
Yes,
false, that's a
no,
false flag operation. That's a false flag operation that you've fallen
Really?
for.
You want Chinese labor doing everything? These people who are tortured, who are practically slaves, who have no food, you think that's defensible? No, there is a conservative argument against using Chinese labor like that.
Look, there is absolutely a conservative argument against against buying products from entities that use forced labor or that use, exploitative labor practices. Absolutely, but that is not tariffs. Okay, that is
one way to get at the problem.
No, tariffs are an economic kind of thing. And by the way, Trump's tariffs, you can read the literature about this, hurt America a heck of a lot more than they hurt China. Okay, tariffs are a left-wing nutball thing, and Trump is guilty on that score. He is guilty on the Mexican on defaming Mexicans as rapists and blah 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 blah. Okay, he had his own.
That line was taken out of context, and you know it. And by the way, okay, now you've given me a challenge. I'm going to write about Trump's tariffs, and I think you or my lefty friend has had this conversation with me before. I've actually considered writing about tariffs, so I will add it to my list of 200 things I need to write about.
Okay, good. And if you do one a week, then I should be reading that one in about 4 years. Let's see, under President Donald Trump Jr.
No. It's going to be 50 years because of all the columns that other people insist that I have to write before that.
Okay, well, just to quote Nancy Reagan, just say no. But on that note, Rachel, we've gone way over because you're just way too interesting once again, and I hope our millions of listeners and viewers out there appreciate how interesting you are and tell their friends. And I also hope that they will come to the thoughtcriminals.ning.com to see what I've been curating out there in terms of the W's, the wins we've been making in fighting wokeism. And it's a very important thing to do. And thank you, Governor DeSantis, for making it the center of your mission.
And I will end on this note. Everybody be sure to tune in next week because I have written what I think may be the best article I have ever written on how we are turning into a hybrid government of governments and big business.
Oh my God, I can't wait to read that because it's true. And it's time somebody finally called it out.
All right, on that note, thanks for watching, everyone. God bless and see you next week.
See ya.